Hi, and welcome to the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. I'm your host, Tegan Thompson. I'm a book lover, a chocoholic, and an INTJ living in a world filled with extroverts. I made this podcast to share my experiences and struggles as an introverted perfectionist, and to bring the inner workings of an introvert's mind to introverts and extroverts alike. So grab a cup of tea and get comfortable. It's time to unmute. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. It is definitely long overdue, and I apologize. I finally finished my pre-matriculation summer classes, so I am so excited. I have a few weeks until I begin my medical school first year. It's called M1, so I'm really excited. But yeah, so I have a little bit of free time, which I'm really excited about, and I can I've got to do another episode. I've got to get back on to doing that. But yeah, unfortunately, my plans for the episode had to be rearranged due to the events of yesterday that happened, and Roe v. Wade being overturned. I know I woke up yesterday and, I was ready because it was my last day of exams and my last day of the program, and so I was really excited to just finish the exams and enter into summer for me. And I was just scrolling through my phone, and of course I had to see that, and it was heartbreaking for me and very difficult to even process. I was just is this really happening? Is this what is actually happening right now? Is am I seeing this correctly? I had to go and Google it. I had to make sure that what I saw was accurate and I wasn't just getting wrong information or something like that. And I know a lot of people have been making jokes make sure you set your clocks back to 50 years ago and stuff like that. And honestly, it's just kind of so true. And scary, honestly, to think that we're pushing ourselves all the way back from all this progress we made. It just feels like it's going out the window at this point, and it's really hard to kind of live in a country that prides themselves on freedom and rights and having access to things that you wouldn't have access to in other countries. When you wake up to things like this and you have to come to terms with the reality that it's not a country on freedom. It's not a country that wants the best for every single person here. It wants only certain people to thrive, and those are the white men and the people who happen to be beside those people. Those are the only people they want to thrive and to survive in this country, and it's very heartbreaking and very disheartening to constantly see one thing after another keep happening, and you're just what is this? Why is this happening? And it's so frustrating. But yeah, I felt like I had to talk about it today. There's no way I could just ignore what happened and talk about something else. So we will be talking about Roe v. Wade being overturned, kind of what that means right now and for the future. So, obviously you already know. If you don't know, then I guess you weren't really paying attention to anything, which is fine, but you might want to pay attention to the things that are happening in politics because they are impacting our daily lives. But Roe v. Wade was overturned just yesterday morning. And what this means is that women have lost their reproductive rights and the rights to their own bodies. In a large majority of states. Not all states are going to ban abortion, because essentially what happened is that the Supreme Court decided that it is something that should be decided by the states themselves. So each state will individually choose, whether or not they will ban abortion. And there are already several states that have banned abortion because they already had it in action and prepared for yesterday when Roe v. Wade was to be overturned. And when that happened, immediately those laws went into place. So I encourage you to look up your state's laws and what your state is planning on doing surrounding abortion and women's reproductive rights. Each state is different, and each state is going to be doing different things. And while they might ban abortion in two states, those two states might have different circumstances around those abortions and different exceptions. So it's really, really important that I completely encourage you to figure out and learn what your state is doing and what your options are as a woman. So that is kind of the big thing. I want to kind of encourage a different perspective on this because, yes, women have lost rights to their own body, and I cannot even imagine having to go through a pregnancy that I don't want to go through, or a pregnancy that I know I will not be able to support this child, or anything like that, or I may not survive the pregnancy. That would be one of the most difficult news to hear for me. I could not imagine being put in that place. But I think it's also important to understand that women are going to be imprisoned for abortion. If a woman aborts a child, and again, it depends on the state that you're in, but if abortion is banned, they're facing prison time. Why does this matter? It matters because there are a higher percent of women who are voting liberally compared to conservatively right now, compared to men, where there is a higher percentage voting conservatively. And like I mentioned earlier in my episode today, this country has one true, goal and desire, and that is to benefit and serve the white male population. And so, since women are minorities and they're not men, then they need to find a solution, a way to balance this out so that their voice can obviously be stronger than that. And banning abortion is very similar to the war on drugs, which primarily targeted the Black and African American populations. And I say this because, the whole purpose of the war on drugs was not necessarily to decrease drug use and drug selling in the United States. It was to imprison Black and African American people. Because imprisoning them meant that their right to vote was taken away, and taking away their right to vote decreases the minority vote that is put out there when we are able to vote, and increases the white voice in this case. And so, with the imprisonment of women who are also a minority, they are not a racial minority, obviously, but they are a gender minority, increasing minority imprisonment in any way will decrease the minority voters, obviously. So, you increase the amount of Black people you throw into prison, you decrease the Black voice in votes. You increase the amount of women who are being thrown into jail, now you are decreasing women's votes. And on top of that, women of color have the highest abortion rates. And so you are going to kind of get this double effect where not only minority people in terms of gender, so, in this case women, and minority race, people of color, are being thrown into jail, and they're losing their right to vote, and now you are decreasing the minority vote, and you are increasing the percent of white male voters. And again, I know that, this may sound harsh or like too generalized, but it is the honest truth. And the honest truth is that the United States does not care about your rights, it does not care about, your quality of life in the United States if you are not a white man. If you are not a white man, if you are a woman, if you're a person of color, if you're anything that is not white male, then they do not want to benefit you. Because if they benefit you, then they have to take away some of their benefits and take away their success, because they have to give some of it to minorities, right? And as a woman of color, it is just so frustrating to have time after time after time, and just these past few years, to see how my rights are potentially being changed and impacted and decreased, that I don't even have the choice anymore to raise a child that I want to raise, or not raise a child that I either don't want to raise or cannot raise for other circumstances. And that is frightening, not just for me, but for other women out there. And I just get so frustrated thinking about this, and I think it's so important to recognize the fact that there are many states that are banning abortion despite the circumstances of the pregnancy itself. For example, there are many states who are banning abortion despite whether or not it's a high-risk pregnancy, banning abortion despite whether it resulted from rape, banning abortion despite whether it resulted from incest, banning abortion despite your economic circumstances. And just from the standpoint that I'm going into the medical field and I'm one day going to be a doctor, to know that there are so many women out there who are potentially going to find out that they're pregnant, and whether or not they wanted this pregnancy, are going to learn that either them or the baby will not survive. And that is just, it's I can't even begin to wrap my mind around it, because a lot of those women are not going to be able to terminate that pregnancy. And the solution to high-risk pregnancies, the treatment for high-risk pregnancies, is termination of the pregnancy, because it puts a life at risk. Whether it is the growing fetus or it is the mother, it puts a life at risk, and that is not safe. And that would mean that you should you should take care of that patient in whatever way you want. And obviously it's their choice. If they want to continue on with a high-risk pregnancy, that's their choice. Or if they want to terminate that, it would be their choice, because they have to face the fact that they're putting their own life at risk. They are potentially going to lose their life if they continue on with the pregnancy, and that is hard itself to face. And there are a lot of women who find out they're pregnant, whether that be with their first child or with their second, third, fourth, or whatever child, right? And recognizing that they are not in a financial place to raise a child, or raise another child. There may be women out there who have had to choose to terminate a pregnancy so that they can continue to feed their children, and provide them with what they need, or to continue on with the pregnancy and give birth to a child that they know that they will not be able to support, and that they will now be jeopardizing how much they're able to support their current children. And having to make that choice, and that choice itself is difficult. But to now say you don't have that choice and we are going to choose for you, and you get to just live with the consequences of that. You get to live in a situation where now your children have to be raised where they may not get food on the table every night, or they may not be able to finish high school because they need to help support the family. They need to find a job and help support the family. And that is even more difficult, to know you couldn't do anything else about it. There's just so many things that are being impacted by this, and so many different lives that are going to be impacted by this. And the key thing about this is that it is a choice. It should be a choice. It does not matter how you choose to live your lifestyle, because that should not be forced upon other people. I myself am a Christian, and I personally would never follow through with an abortion. But that is how I choose to live. That is how I decide for myself and my own body, and I would never, ever put my choice onto someone else. Everyone should be able to make their own choices based on their own circumstances. If one person finds out that they're gluten-free, or they're allergic to lactose, or allergic to chocolate. Chocolate's like my favorite thing. So if someone found out that they were allergic to chocolate and they were like, no one else can have chocolate, I'd be like, no, just because you can't have it doesn't mean I cannot, right? I think it's silly when you put it in that perspective. Or when we go back just a few years ago, when people were fighting for their own rights because they didn't want to wear a mask during the COVID pandemic, which, mind you, we are still in, because it was their right to their own body, whether or not they wore a mask. But what goes on with the female reproductive system is not a woman's right. I guess it is up to the government. That just doesn't make any sense to me. How you can make choices like that for other people who aren't even going to impact your own life. The person across the country who decided to abort their child because they couldn't raise the child, or the person next door to me who decided to abort their child because they didn't want to raise a child. That does not impact my life. That does not change how I live my life. That does not change what I choose to decide if I happen to get pregnant. Those do not impact me, nor do they impact the people sitting in government chairs and making these decisions over us. And I think it's so important to recognize this. Just because you may follow one lifestyle, or you may have one belief, does not mean you need to force it on other people. In fact, you should not force it onto other people. It's not acceptable, and it is frustrating to recognize that because you are a minority, that your rights don't mean anything. And this is really hard for women because they are recognizing this right now. And they're going through this period of time, especially a lot of white women who have not had to go through something like this where their rights are being taken away to this extent. And it is frustrating. It is incredibly saddening and disheartening, and it's okay if you feel that way. Do not push those feelings down. Feel those feelings. It is very difficult, very hard. But again, it should be a choice. And that is just so frustrating because, you know, this country prides itself on saying, oh, we're the land of the free. You have freedom, you have rights, you have access to things that you may not have access to in other places, but in reality, that's not true. White men have freedom. White men have rights. White men have access to the things they want to have access to. And not just all white men. I mean, white men in general have a certain way of being able to live that other people cannot. But rich white men also have enormous, access and abilities that people who are minorities or grew up in poverty could not even begin to imagine. And that's just so frustrating because, you want to believe that the world can change, that society can change and grow and make progress, and then that progress feels like it gets taken back 15 steps, and it feels like a scam. It feels like you live in a country that is based on scams. That being said, it won't stop here. Roe v. Wade being overturned, that is not where they're going to stop. They are going to keep pushing to try and ban other things. Senator John Cornyn actually commented saying, now Duplessis versus Ferguson/Brown versus Board of Education, which targets African American civil rights and protection. So there are a lot of other things that could be impacted in the future that, either Supreme Court or the government will try to target. This includes same-sex marriage and just same-sex relationships in general. It includes LGBTQ plus rights, access to contraception, interracial marriage, and BIPOC civil rights protection and education. And these are all things that will impact minorities. And it's so scary to think that these things could one day no longer be a right you have access to, because there have been people that have worked so hard and continue to work so hard to make sure that we have these rights and we are able to access these things, and to know that those could be taken away from us in a few votes because the people who are voting choose to believe that just because they don't believe in that lifestyle means other people shouldn't live that lifestyle, is frustrating and angering. So, what can you do about it? I sat and I was like, what can I do about this? I feel like there should be things that I can do about this. And the biggest thing you can do is to vote. Vote and make your voice heard, whether that be just your local elections, your state elections, all the way up to presidential elections, right? You should vote and make yourself heard. Make sure that your voice is being heard and that you are able to put your vote and your beliefs into the situation. Because if you do not vote because you think, so many other people are vote, my one vote is not going to mean anything. How many other people do you think like that? How many other people who have the similar beliefs as you and want the same changes as you think like that? And now, just because you think that means other people are probably thinking like that, and you are taking away a big chunk. So you go out and vote, and you push other people to vote, because voting is what makes your voice heard. And while it may not make changes right now, it may not make changes in a few years, you keep voting, because hopefully one day your voice will be heard, and your vote will be counted, and you'll know that you have worked hard to do that. You can also protest if that is something you are comfortable doing. I know people don't always feel comfortable going out to protest, but you can protest. It's as simple as going on like Facebook and looking at the events. I'm sure there's plenty of protests going on that you can find on the Facebook events. You can go on Google and you can search. You can go on your local or state websites and see if there's anything going on that they may be doing to support women's rights, or other rights too. It doesn't just have to be women's rights. You can donate. You can find there are a ton of organizations that are working hard to keep our rights that we have, and also work to gain rights that we have lost. So you can donate and support those organizations. And if you are not a woman, you can be incredibly supportive to the people around you who are impacted by this decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Your support and just letting them know that you're there for them is very meaningful. And it lets them know that there are people outside of their minority that are supporting them and believe that they deserve the same rights as them. And that is really, really important. And also to listen. Again, you are not a woman. You are not experiencing this. You haven't experienced this. As a man, you have not had the rights to your body taken away. So you cannot understand or comprehend how frustrating and heartbreaking it is. So listen to the people around you who are impacted, because learning their point of view and learning about it will help you become more educated, so that you can educate other people who do not believe women deserve that right to their own body. So yeah, there are a lot of things you can do, and I encourage you to take action, and I encourage you to vote. And can't give up. You just can't give up, because if you give up, then they will keep pushing to do more and more and more to restrict your rights. And we cannot have that. We do not want that. So you have to fight back and make your voice heard. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you learned anything new, please go share it with a friend. And as always, have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you guys again next week on the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. Come on.